your camera on, you will be recorded, and this video will be uploaded to the Turn It On YouTube channel, which will be made publicly available. Also, if you ask a question, you will also be heard on that. So if you don't wish to be recorded and then shared on our YouTube channel, can you please turn off your camera now and also mute your mic, because background noise is distracting for others. We also will pause at lots of different points to take questions. If you wish to ask a question, it's just not convenient to jump in at that point. The conversation bar on the side, which is the little speech bubble, and the meetings bar at the top of your window is where you can add questions. And I will come back over and I'll pick those up in between, and I'll do my best to answer any questions that come up this afternoon. Okay, let's move through. So the session itself is meant for people that may have already dabbled with Teams, or you've come along to one of our previous training sessions, or you've been given Teams as part of the DFE funding recently, and you're just trying to think how you can use it to transform learning. And we aren't just going to focus around the hybrid learning situation, which we've got to have some pupils at home and maybe some in school. We'll also talk about how it could be used meaningfully in school at the same time. One of the other things that we're going to do for you this afternoon, because Turn It On is a global training partner with Microsoft, we're able to award you and accredit you for coming along to this afternoon's training. If you've got one of the accounts already for what's called the Microsoft Education Center, that's great. Later on, I will issue you with the code. If you don't already have a code for the Microsoft Education Center, you open up a web browser and in your search engine type Microsoft Education Center, and then where those fingers are pointing in the top right-hand corner of the landing page, you click the sign in button and it'll ask you to create an account. You could use your school email address or a personal one, it doesn't matter. Then you'll be able to redeem the code. The code will mean at the end of this session that you will have covered the equivalent of 1,000 points worth of study, and you'll get the first badge on the left-hand side of that screen there. You'll become a certified Microsoft Innovative Educator. You get that after 1,000 points. You can also undertake more courses on the Microsoft Education Center, which are around Teams or other parts in Teams, such as OneNote. Those are self-study courses, but then you'll get more points awarded and you'll gradually get more accreditation. It's quite useful for your own CPD, and it then feeds back into school. If you think that's something for you, we are also running a separate program for Microsoft Innovative Educator Experts, which is like the next step after MIE. That's for people who've really found a thirst for this type of thing and they're finding to have a good impact in school, either with pupils or with staff. You can undertake a series of webinars with us. If you want to sign up for that, more information is available on the Turn It On website under the events section. But also at the same time, you can always ask me about it at the end. The areas that we're going to cover today, we're going to have a look at creating a team and how to structure that team. As said earlier, we are going to discuss that blended learning and how we could successfully use Teams in that scenario. We'll also touch upon the fact it's not just an academic tool. You can use it very effectively for pastoral reasons. We'll also have a look very briefly at how to administer settings and policies. Then we'll go through the different tabs in Teams that you've got there, and we'll discuss, for instance, how you would use a post and how that can then enhance communication you may already have in school. Also look at the file section, and we will touch upon assignments and also OneNote class notebook. So there's quite a lot to get through this afternoon, but by the end of it, the vision is that you'll have a really good grounding within how to use Teams, what it can do for your school, and then you can reflect upon how it's going to best sit with your staff, your pupils that are using this, and also not to importantly forget the parents and carers at home currently that are trying to support their children in accessing Teams, and just trying to make this as easy as we can for everybody involved. One of the first things I usually get asked is, well, just at the moment, how easy is it to get into Teams? Is there going to be any barriers to that? If you're having things like a Teams meeting, you don't even really need to have an Office 365 account. You can use it without. But I would advise creating pupils an Office 365 account. To start with, it's, well, where can we use Teams? Teams itself can be used in pretty much any context. If you've got a Windows computer, or you've got an Apple computer, or even if you're on a Chromebook, you can get a dedicated Teams app for that. You can also get Teams through a web browser. So most major web browsers, current web browsers, support Teams. Anything like Microsoft Edge browser, Google Chrome browser, Firefox, all of those will work quite happily with Teams. If you're using an older computer and maybe got Windows 7 or you're still clinging to Internet Explorer and Teams don't like each other. Microsoft stopped supporting Internet Explorer ages ago, and it just doesn't work well with Teams. Sometimes I get people contacting me saying Teams isn't behaving correctly, and that can sometimes be the reason. Additionally to that, if you've got anyone using Linux, they can use it on there. And then on mobile devices, Teams will work very happily on a mobile device, be it a tablet or a mobile phone. I absolutely accept, as somebody who came from a teaching background, that it's not ideal to have pupils working on a really small screen. And it's okay for watching videos, but getting down to the nuts and bolts of doing something, the keyboard can often cover half the screen. But there's an app available on the Google Play Store for all Android devices, and there's also a Teams app available on the iOS store, iTunes, to get onto iOS devices. So regardless of devices that someone might be using at home, it's pretty much open to the fact that you can get in one way or another. So it's not going to be an issue for you to get pupils in. And hopefully with the recent government device, we know that in an ideal world, we'd all have a few more devices to be able to give to pupils, but there may be a few more that we can give to those families that really do need a device to get on and access remote learning. Teams itself has come on leaps and bounds. There has been all sorts of things added, such as there's been a greater number of people that you can get into the boxes and the grids. By default, Teams will handle that. You can now override that for 2x2, 3x3 or 7x7 grid. You can control how meetings start, so you can't have people getting in before you. That can be either done by policies or settings in the meeting. And more recently, there's been some very, very effective additions to the Teams features. Breakout rooms I've started to use now a fair bit, where in a breakout room you can take your whole class that you've maybe got on a live lesson, and you could sift them a bit like you're setting table work, and you can then send a certain number of pupils to different breakout rooms, and you can move between those breakout rooms and visit them as they get on with work. You obviously got to be able to trust the pupils to work responsibly in those breakout rooms, and there might be some that you want to keep in the main meeting, so you can just keep an eye on them. But there's another tool there for you to manage that distance learning that wasn't there previously. Another question I usually get around Teams at the very beginning is, well, what is Teams? Teams is, you think of it like a hub, and everything connects into that hub, and Teams is at the center of it. Everyone can be connected in there. So you can have an account for your staff, you can have one for your pupils or students, you can have an account for your governors. If you're in a trust, then trust staff can have one centrally in the trust, but they can also link into your school. And if you so wish, you could give parents an account, but at the moment that's more complex, and there may be some light at the end of the tunnel with future developments in Teams about the way that parents access people's work in Teams. But at the moment, most schools don't create accounts for parents, although it is theoretically possible. The other single hub philosophy is that your resources are all in one place, and Teams is at the center of that. So whether it's using an app in Office 365 or a Microsoft app, be it Word or Excel, or using features such as being able to call someone or chat with them, it will also link out to third-party subscriptions that you have, and that's growing all the time. Some schools I know here use things like Wakelet or might use Kahoot in upper key stage 2 for quizzes in class. You no longer have to have people venturing off to find those independently as another tab in a web browser. You can have a shortcut for those in Teams, and everything will roll from there. So to kick this off, one of the first things that people normally grapple with, if you haven't been through one of the DFE funded projects, is how on earth do I organise and structure that? Now, depending on your educational phase, you're either going to have a class team in a primary school per class, and that's the best structure and the most effective structure we have found at Turn It On. Or if you're working in a secondary school, you will usually have a team per subject, and you might divide up the sets within that subject for the different year groups in channels. Some secondaries have a single team per subject and then have all of their different year groups and sets down the side as channels. And if you don't know what channels are at the moment, don't worry, we'll go across and look at channels in just a tick. And other secondary schools have said, no, we'll actually have a different subject team for every year group. So you might have year 7 science, year 8 science, year 9 science, and you have your sets within there. It's thinking about you, your staff, what's right for you as a school, but it's got the flexibility to organise either way. And then it's about creating the accounts. If you haven't been through a recent DFE funded project, you can create accounts for pupils, but to manage those, it's really best if you decide to have some identifier on those pupil accounts, such as have their year of entry before their name. So if they were in last year's reception, this year's year 1 in the primary school, they might be 19 Joe Blogs, so that you know that anyone with the 19 prefix is in year 1 currently. So when you start to see them in bigger context, you can pick them out, and it also makes it easier to manage it. And there's a link for the DFE funding. If anyone hasn't applied yet, there is DFE funding available to the tune of £1,500 for primary schools, or £2,000 for a secondary school, or it's £1,000 for each school in a MAT, where you can apply if you currently do not have pupil accounts and pupil teams set up. If you've already got them set up, then sorry, you can't access that fund. But if you haven't got them set up, you can apply for that funding, and then you can Turn It On down as a partner, and then we will get assigned to help you create all of this structure, so you don't have to create it on your own. But if you've already done that yourself and it's already in existence, then I'm sorry, you can't access that funding. The other thing that people often ask me at the beginning is, well, how on earth do we get started, Martin? Where do we go? It's really important to think about the capacity to bring about this new platform or getting it established effectively. So you will need to decide who the digital leaders are going to be in the staff. Who are those people that are either tech savvy or have a passion for this sort of thing that can support other staff in the school? You might also need to think about pupil digital ambassadors. Even though they're at home and they're working in their own environment, you can still, if you've rolled this out, for instance, with year 6 first in the primary school, and then you're going to cascade it down to year 5 and down to year 4, you are really, really doing yourself a favour if you can get some digital ambassadors that are pupils that become well versed in how to use it from a pupil perspective, and then reach out to the year group below when you launch it, but also may even record videos that can help their peers to get in and find things like how to start a meeting or where to pick up their homework and so forth. It's really powerful, and also takes the pressure off the digital leaders in the school. One thing that you really need to clearly set out is the expectations for use. There are restrictions that can be set in Teams, and you can set that from the policies, or you can apply some manually. But all too often, there will be certain things that you want people to be able to do. That's chat to each other in a team, not in private. And they need to know that it's a bit like a physical classroom, and there are boundaries, and certain things are allowed and others will not be tolerated, things that are going to upset others that people might find offensive. So you almost want to set out a class digital charter as you launch Teams to pupils to avoid those pitfalls and save you having to try and manage it later after the floodgates have opened. I can't emphasize enough that if you are going to send this out to parents, have some sort of launch meeting or have some sort of launch information. Again, if you've been through DFE work, there are launch guides that you can give out, and that will help you in the essence that you won't get loads and loads of parents contacting the school and asking a million questions before you even get started with using Teams. Now, when you come to set up a team for the first time, you're going to have to choose from one of 4 types of teams. If it's a team for teaching and learning, you'll use class teams. If it's a team for governors or in a trust, then usually a PLC team works best. If it's for staff internally in school that are used to the day-to-day running of the school, whatever their role is, from admin team right the way through to classroom teachers, you would be best advised to use a staff team. And then the other is a bit of a catch-all if you can't make your mind up, and that has a lot of the features, but I would try to use one of the 3 on the left: class, personal learning, professional learning community, or staff. As far as getting people in are concerned, you can have up to a maximum of 200 in there, and that will increase in the future. I haven't really come across a problem yet with getting the amount of pupils in that you want, and you don't tend to max out a single team because you'll have either teams for different classes or teams for different subjects and so forth, depending on which phase you're in. So at this point, I'm going to jump out of the presentation and I am going to get into showing you how this all looks like. Are there any initial questions just from that opening bit about how to get started? And I will gladly answer those as I go across. Nope. Okay, I'll move over. So what you will see now is what's called the landing page in Office 365. This is where you would come in. Certainly if you've got a new pupil account, the idea here is that pupils land somewhere. In the end, it's going to be very useful and familiar to them. So any recent documents that you can see here, I've been editing quite a few, can be picked up and opened again by clicking the top. All their recent documents are there, and then they've got all of their apps available down the side. If you're a member of staff, you've been using Office 365 for a while, you'll more than likely end up arriving in your Outlook email, and that's fine. You can still navigate to the same apps that I've got down the side here by clicking the app launcher in the top left-hand corner, and all of the same apps are in here on the side. You may not have some of the apps that I've currently got available to me. So for instance, I've got things like the admin access. That's because I'm an administrator for this Office 365. Most people in school wouldn't have that level of privilege, but you'll have most of the apps that you've got in there, and they are meant for not just educational context, they can be used across the school. We are going to focus this afternoon more on using Teams, so you can either click Teams from there. If you're using the Teams app that's installed on your computer, you would just double click the icon and then Teams would open up. Broadly speaking, nearly all of the features that are available in the app are available in the web browser version, so you're not going to be at a disadvantage by using one or the other, as long as you, as I said, you're using an up-to-date browser, and also that you're using an up-to-date version of that browser. So you're making sure that your updates are applied to your browser, so you're getting all the latest features. So that does sometimes cause upsets. Another thing that you'll need to do is if you're using Teams in a web browser, unlike the app, you'll need to allow Teams access to your camera and access to your microphone. I've lost track of the amount of support calls that I've been on where someone said, my camera doesn't work in Teams or my microphone doesn't work in Teams. And it's often because that option there, block, is selected and it just stops you using it. So some people choose the app for that reason, but it's one of those things, that pitfalls that you can avoid straight away. And often a lot of pupils or parents at home will ask you that in a distance learning scenario. Here I've got all my teams, but before we even delve into those, if you've got the correct level of access, up in the top right hand corner, you're going to have Join or Create Team button. When you click the Join and Create Team button, if you're in as just what's called a member, in other words, that's someone that can use Teams and use its features, but you can't change the way it's organized or add new features, you will just see the box here that says Join Team with a code. And you can get somebody who owns a team to give you the code for the team, and then you can enroll in it, and then you would end up seeing something like this here, where all the teams that you enroll into will start appearing and stacking up. If you've got what's called owner status, which is more like admin, you'll have the button here that says create team. If you haven't got that, you might need to raise a support ticket either for the IT company that works with you, such as Turn It On, or somebody in your school. But when you press create team, you'll get to that window we were at before. You can choose here what type of team you're going to create. So in my example, I'm going to create a class team. I give that team a name, so I might call this, let's call this demo class 2021. Description, this is going to be a primary class. Then you can decide down here whether you're going to create this from a template. And as you use Teams more, you can have, to save you making a team up from the beginning each time, you can have template teams, which already have certain settings in there. You can join another session where we look at how to create template teams, but for today it's there as an option. You go to next and it will start to create a team for you in the background. And here you can choose people that are enrolled. So in here I might say that I want my principal involved. So I'm going to add in Patty there. I'm going to add them. And as you add them, you get the option in here to choose what sort of access they have. And I might say, well, I want Deborah in here as well. She's one of my teachers and she's going to be in this team too. So here are my staff stacking up, and I'd also like some pupils. So let's see if I can find a pupil in here. There's Al, and let's have Rosie, and we'll also have Robin. And we'll add all those in at the same time. So you can bulk add in there as well. If you've had email groups created, you can add people by email groups. If you were in a single form entry and maybe you wanted all of your year 8s or year 4s, there's a group called year 4. You can select the year 4 group in there. Once that's been done, you press close. Then all of a sudden you'll find yourself here in a brand new blank team. Now this is where you could take one of two pathways. Either you're going to have to do that process yourself, or you'll be using a sync tool like Active Cloud Management from Turnitin, and that sync tool will link up with your MIS system, whatever it is, RM Integris, Capita Sims, and so forth. And what it will do is it will look at that database and it will pick out the names of staff and pupils and also which classes or subjects they're associated with. And then that sync tool will take care of all that manual administration that I just did with adding teachers and adding pupils. And it will pull them out of the Sims database and it will send that information to Office 365, and it will automatically manage their membership and their settings so that if it detects they're a pupil, it will set certain restrictions, and if it's a staff, it will give certain privileges. But also, if a member of staff, let's say, went on maternity leave and somebody came in to cover them, as long as they're entered into the MIS system, they automatically get joined to the correct class, and then they would have access. Or if a pupil comes mid-year and somebody else leaves, it takes care of them coming out. If not, you need to manage that process yourself, and you go to the 3 dots, and in the 3 dots, there's an option here called Manage Team. And in Manage Team, this is where you can add more members if you're not using one of those automated sync tools, but you can also change people's statuses in here. So if I've got somebody that's a member, I can move them to be an owner. Or if I want to downgrade somebody here, for instance, I really don't want these pupils here to be owners, so I'm going to make them members. And I'm going to move my staff up to be from being members to being owners. And that will mean it's the right way around. Otherwise, the pupils would have privileges that I don't want them to have. So I'm going to move them up to be an owner, and I'm going to move Deborah up to be an owner, and that sorts that out for me. So you can see it's quite quick and easy. If I want to remove someone, I just press the cross and it takes them out of my team. You can also have people that make requests to join your teams, and that's where you approve them there. I mentioned the word channels earlier, and I said that I would come back to explain what it means, and now is that time. Every team that's created will have what's called a general channel. You have to have a channel for a team to exist in the first place, but what you can do is you can add more channels in. So if I went to the channels tab over here, there's my general channel, and I want to add another channel, so I can go in here and I can click add channel. So another channel that I might have in my classroom could be that I want to chat privately with a pupil, and we don't give pupils private chats because it means that they could be private chatting with other pupils, but I might want to have a chat with somebody else. So I'm going to put Rosie's name in this. So this is pupil chat. I'm going to make this channel private, so only me and the pupil can see it. So I'm going to next. And I'd always say in here, if I find Rosie, there's Rose Patterson. I would always say that you want you plus another teacher. So I'm going to go get Deborah, because Deborah is working in there with me. So that means 2 teacher safeguarding reasons that can see what's going on. And then click add, and then I'm going to click done. So often I get asked, well, if I've disabled private chat, and we'll come to private chat in a bit, how on earth do I have a chat with a pupil without everybody seeing in the general channel? That's how you would do it. You wouldn't want to have too many of those, but that's a way where then if you're having a conversation with Rosie, Rosie would see the chat in here between you and Rosie, but the rest of the pupils would not, because it stays separate to the general channel. So channels can be used for dividing up teams, but broadly speaking, the only thing that you normally have in a primary class team is a general channel. Now that's so that when pupils arrive in here, there's only a single channel for them to go to, and then you can start having conversations with them here in the post section and using other features. When you also come into a class team for the first time, you'll need to set up your class notebook. Your class notebook is like a digital piece of paper that you can use for day-to-day teaching and learning. And we'll look a bit more how that functions in the second half of this training session. But you can set up your class notebook the first time by pressing this button here. You want to choose blank notebook. It will then tell you you're going to get certain areas created for you. So there's going to be a collaboration space where staff and pupils can work together. There's a content library where you can send resources to pupils, but staff can manage it. There's a teachers only section where you can make materials, and every single pupil is going to get their own notebook created where you can have certain sections, and then you press next to make those sections. I'm just going to discard that in a moment. Excuse me. You go through that process and you'll have your OneNote set up, and we'll look at what that looks like when it comes out the other end of that process when we go back to a team that's already been created. So as far as managing your teams are concerned, that was a primary one. Anyone I've got on here from a secondary school, I mentioned that you'd have your sets down the side. So if I was in here in my demo secondary team, and this was an English team, I might have down the side all of my different sets here for year 7 set 1, year 7 set 2, year 7 set 3, so that if I was a head of English, I could go in and I could manage what the teachers were doing with my different sets in my subject. And as I said earlier, some secondary schools prefer to have all of their like year 7, year 8, year 9 sets for a particular subject in one team as different channels. But other schools prefer to have a channel for a subject. So they'd have English year 7, and then they'd have the year 7 sets. Then they'd have English year 8 and the year 8 sets, and so forth. So it depends on how your school works. Special schools, if I've got anyone here from special school, it really is a mixture of the two. A lot of special schools go for the primary setup rather than the secondary setup, although I do have a handful of special schools that prefer the secondary setup, particularly if they're a special school that's dealing with a setting where they're dealing with students up to 19. Once you get into a class team and you're here in your channel, the next part is to look at not the organization, but how to get the most from the different tabs we have along the top, but also to come back to the section down the side. So broadly, the way to think of it, the options that I've got in the vertical purple bar down the side, I call that the me space. That's the bits of teams that relate to me and what I do with it and how I'm using it. The tabs along the top are called the we space because that's what we do together, and they're the options that we can use and they're available to us. And in this situation, it's me as a teacher and the pupils that I have in my class. That's the we. So if we go back to the me space, down the side, you've got an activity feed. And what it shows here is anything that's been going on with me and another member of staff, or me or a pupil in school. It's just a way to dip in and see anything that's been going on. If I haven't been in here for a while, anything that's new will be in a bold text, and I'll have a red dot over the top so I can see that it's something that draws my attention in, and that's called a notification. If you need to change your notifications, you go up to the top right hand corner, click your initials, go to settings, a little menu pops up here. Then go to the notifications tab on the left, and you can change your notifications for different features in Teams. So for instance, if I wanted my chats to notify me in a different way, I could go to edit, and then I could either have it coming up in the feed and sliding in as a banner from the side of the screen. But if I was a class teacher or I was doing a lot of remote learning at the moment, I might want that just to only show up in the feed. So if I'm sharing my Teams with a set of pupils who are all at home, the message from another teacher doesn't slide in on the right hand side of the screen with the first line of what they're saying, particularly if it's something sensitive the pupil shouldn't be privy to. But if I was working in the admin team and actually it didn't make a blind bit of difference, I might want those banners. So you pick what your notification settings are going to be, and then once you've got those all locked in, you press the cross. You'll play around with those for the first couple of weeks just to get them to suit your role in school. Chat is private chat. That allows you to talk with other staff in school. We recommend it being only other staff in school, and if you are somebody who's gone through a DFE funded project, that will have been restricted for you anyway. We as a company have a policy that we don't let pupils have the private chat. That private chat leads to all sorts of either behavioural issues or safeguarding issues where they're discussing things behind your back and you can't see the private chats that they've got going on. So the chats are a bit like an instant messenger platform. If you need to speak with someone, you click the pen and the pad at the top. You might say, I need to speak with a person, you lock in their email address. Here is a conversation I've already got going on with this demo member of staff. You can see we've been talking for a while in here. Some of it is obviously a bit of fun because we've used some Giphies, and others are just for asking questions. One of the communication aspects of Teams acting as a digital hub is that you no longer have to keep sending emails to people, or you don't have to use a separate instant messaging platform. You can keep everything here in Teams, and people are getting notified because they're in here using it. They'll get red dots appearing over the chat, so you've got some new chat responses come in. I find it so easy now to ask someone a quick question and get a quick response back, and I'm not waiting for them to check their emails and respond to me at break, lunch, or after school. It tends to be that people have in the mindset, oh, it's only a quick question, I'll flick it back to them. But you shouldn't use chat for trying to send huge paragraphs of information. That's still better for that to go in an email. So it's really thinking about what you want to know. If I want to write something, I can just click on the box at the bottom here and say, I don't know, good afternoon. Are we meeting later to plan for next week? And I could leave that as a text chat and then press the little arrow on the right hand side, and that would send it and fire it into this chat that I've got going on here. Or I could press the editing button, which is the A with the paintbrush, and that brings in more options. So I've got simple text formatting options along the top. I can also throw a link into this chat if I wanted to. If I found a website that I wanted someone else to read before we met, or I found a good resource for teaching, I could give that to somebody else, send it over to them. You've got options that are hidden in here. So hidden on the side under the three dots, we've got inserting a table, so you can have tables in there as well as bullet points in formatting, font sizes and colors and all of those things that you normally do in a text editor. Down the bottom here, I might say, well, I want them to respond to me and understand that it's important. I know if we're going to meet later. So I could apply an important, or I could put an urgent in if it's something that can't wait. And I also get that read receipt, and that's going to be updating now. So I think I'm going to move that back to important. You've also got the red band down the side. If I wanted to get a resource across to them, I don't have to email that any longer. That's all gone. I could share from my OneDrive, or I could share from my SharePoint, but I can also attach it here in the chat. So I can click on my OneDrive and I can attach the resource. So if I wanted to go into Pastoral, there was a resource in there. Let's go and try something else. Let's say it's admin test. And go into Office, and in there's an admin doc. I could click on that admin doc and it would attach it at the bottom of that message there. You can upload from your computer as well, and if you click on that, it will look to the files locally on your computer and you can attach from there. Here is where I've picked up the emojis. Use them sparingly. They are an education version of emojis, so there isn't anything in there either for staff or pupils that they're going to find particularly offensive. So if I was going to click on there, and I want to pop one in just for a bit of fun, I might put that one in there, and that's in there. I can also, if I wish, insert an emoji, so sorry, a Giphy, so that could be in there. But if it's inappropriate because we're talking about something professional, I can take that back out as well. You've got stickers. I don't often use stickers in chats with staff, but I do use them a lot in class Teams, and I'll come back to how they're used later. If you had an endless conversation going on with someone and you know you're not getting anywhere, you can click this button and then schedule with this member of staff a meeting. It will automatically push them into a meeting invite. You give it a title, you choose the day and the time, and you press send, and then that will go directly to their calendar. It will also appear in your calendar. So sometimes going backwards and forwards, just asking questions endlessly means that you're not really getting very far. You just have to have a meeting where you're going to have a video call, or you're going to pick up the phone and speak to each other. So I'm just going to send that now at the moment. In it goes. You can see the important message there. If I ever need to edit something, I click the three dots. I've got the ability to go back in and re-edit a message. So I've got the options there to do that. If I decided I want to put a video in, Stream is the option that you use to put a video in. If I click Stream and I bothered to record anything in Stream or upload anything to Stream, Stream is an app in Office 365 that stores your videos. You can click on them, they'd be square thumbnails here, and then they insert a bit like those animated Giphies, and then someone can play a video. They're really useful for recording sections of staff meetings if somebody couldn't attend and they need to see something really important. It might be how to do a lateral flow test or something like that, if you're having to administer those now in school and somebody needs to see that, or you want somebody to go and reference that, that could go in there, and then people could watch that video. You can also upload videos you've recorded on your computer from other things into Stream as well, and they can go quite nicely into team chats or into Teams themselves. Once I've edited that, I can press tick. That quite happily sit there. If I decided I made a real mess of that, I can delete it and it will take it out. And as you can see here, whether it's something that's urgent or there's an example of a document attached, it just is an informal discussion between you and another member of staff, or it can be between you and a group of staff. So up here at the top, I've got 3 members of staff, and it goes backwards and forwards. It's to complement email. It's not to replace email. But if you decided, look, you're having this 3-way chat, you knew these 3 members of staff weren't in lessons or delivering remote learning, you can hit that button there and you'll go straight into a spontaneous video call with them, and it'll pull them all into a meeting, and you can just then see each other and talk to each other. Or if you don't want to see each other, you can have an audio call, so you don't have to worry about dialing each other's mobile phones separately. You just press the audio call button and they will all get called into an audio version of Teams, and you can talk to each other like it's over the phone. The audio call is separate to the calls button at the bottom. The calls button down there only gets used if your school has decided to upgrade your Office 365 license and replace your telephone system to make calls internally and externally. Otherwise, that calls button at the bottom there, ignore that. It won't do a lot for you. It's the button up here that will work most for you. So that's chat. You've got down the side here, and I'll take questions after this, your personal calendar. So you can see here I've got a reoccurring whole staff meeting. If I decided that I wanted to communicate with staff tomorrow morning, and we are going to have a whole staff briefing at 9:30, so this might be morning briefing. I'm going to invite all staff. So if I had an all staff group, I would start typing here for all staff. You can see I've got all company, so I might put that in. I won't do that because it's going to go to absolutely everyone in this demo version. So I'll put the head in there. So it depends on whether you've got your group set up as to whether you've got all staff or not. If you haven't, then you need to ask for these groups, email groups, to be set up so you can use them over here in Teams. It's going to be 9:30. I think it's only going to be a 15-minute thing, so I'm actually going to delete that 10. So I'll say 9 to 9:45, and then it's just going to be urgent matters. And I send that. And I could send that and it will just go to the calendars of the staff if I leave it there. But I can also attach it to a channel. If I wanted to attach it to a channel in a team, I click this button here, and then it might be that I want this to be visible in my staff team. So I click staff team and I want it to go to the general channel in the staff team, and then it appears as a notification in there as well. So I'm going to press send now, and then that is winding its way into my calendar there. But if I quickly pop back over to Teams and I come out of my class team and I go into my staff team, in my staff team down here I've got morning briefing, and tomorrow all my staff do is click that link there. They can go to their calendar, it's 2 routes to the same thing, but they can click that there and they'll notice the morning briefing and they're going to attend. If you want to add some more information in underneath, you can hit the reply button, or other staff could reply and ask, does this apply to me? I can't make it, but is there anything important I need to know, and so forth. So it's another way to have morning briefings or lunch briefings. If you did it at break times when all the staff came in for a coffee, it's a way to still do that in Teams and have community and still be able to talk to each other and get together. Once you've got these meetings set up, if you click on them and go to edit, there's an option at the top here called meeting options, and this allows more granular control of the meetings. Now, there are ways to do this from Teams Admin Center to set default meetings policies, but you can as well go in here. So for instance, today you had to be authorized to come into my meeting. So who can bypass the lobby? I'm going to say it's only me, and I'm going to get in first as the person who organizes this meeting, and nobody else can bypass that lobby. Do I want people to be announced? In other words, I get a pop-up window that says that Mr. Smith has arrived, and do I want to admit them? Yes, I do. Who can present? Well, I may say this is a live lesson or something instead of a staff briefing. So it could be that only people in my organisation or specific people. If it's specific people, you might want to say who that's going to be. So I'm going to say it is only myself and the head teacher that are going to be able to present. The rest of the staff can't share their screen. And do we want people to be able to unmute and talk? Well, this is a staff meeting, so yes, but I could switch that off if it was a pupil meeting, and then they wouldn't be able to unmute their mics and talk. I save those options, and I can do that manually, and that will be done, and that's absolutely fine. But at the same time, you might want to have that done as a policy. So one of the other things that we said we would look at very briefly today was managing Teams via policies. Now, you need admin rights to do this, which is why I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on it. But if you went to the admin console, I'm going to open that in a new tab. There's a dedicated admin center for Teams where you can manage things like policies for meeting or taking away private chats for pupils. So when you land here, you go to show all, and then you go down to where it says Teams at the bottom. It will open up a dedicated admin center for Teams. And in Teams here is where you can go and you can set all of the different policies. So it might be messaging policies, and you go into your messaging policies, and then you can decide what's going to happen for pupils, maybe students there, as the policies of what they can and can't do. So some of those meeting settings that I've just set manually can be set here from in the admin center. You wouldn't on a day-to-day have access to this. It's a very, very powerful tool, and an incorrect click could mess up everything for the whole school, which is why it's restricted access. And if you raise a support ticket, this would be where those changes are applied. So if you know you're having to go in and change a meeting setting every single time for a lesson, it's worth raising a support ticket and saying, look, could the policy be changed for all pupils so that when they come into a meeting, they don't get into the meeting before me, and the default is that they have to wait till I'm in there first, and then I'll let them in, a bit like letting pupils into a classroom, that they don't come in through the door until I'm in the classroom and present. So those sorts of policies are really important, just making Teams work in the way that you want it to work, and not be something that you're battling with. I'm just going to pause there now because I've covered an awful lot of ground, and Teams chats and Teams calendar is around communication. Before we go back into Teams themselves, I'll throw it open to any questions, or go and pick up any questions we might have over in the chat. So I'm just going to go back and have a look. If you want to unmute at that point, you can, but I've got loads of questions in this. I'm going to start working my way through these. You can have notifications. Here's when I say meeting Teams. Yeah, see, if you say in notifications, notify me when we're in a meeting, when you're not present, you'll get a red dot, Mr. Scott, over your activity feed. And then when you click on the activity feed, you should see things that have happened when you weren't present in that meeting from last week. If you weren't aware you had to set that up, it's just popping into that notification section in there, and then choose meetings or activity, and you'll be able to change that for you. Are you able to edit or delete a chat once it's been sent? Yes, I've shown you how to do that, and that's on the 3 dots in the top right hand corner. You only get notifications if an application like email. I don't think you can create an email notification from Teams. Yeah, so the notification about emails, if you want to be notified that you've had new emails while you're here in Teams, there is an option for that in notifications, but the default is that you get notified about emails that you're receiving unless you decide to switch that off, or someone changes a policy in your Teams admin center to switch that off. That is another thing that often happens. Another question here from Mr. Scott. So staff will need to have Teams open at all times, otherwise you miss a message. Most of the time, if you're using Teams, yeah, I tend to have it just minimized on the desktop. Is one of the things down in the taskbar on Windows, or in the dock on an Apple computer in a Chromebook. You get a little red dot over the actual program itself, and that normally tells you that something new is going on in Teams, and you can flick in there periodically. I wouldn't drive yourself mad by going in all the time, but it just lets you know there's something in there. You might need to look at that. Calendar link with Google Calendars. Welcome to the wonderful world of working across platforms. It's easier if you decide to go into one system or the other. The calendar format that Google uses is slightly different to the calendar formatting that Windows uses or Apple uses. And if you're setting up an event in Google, it doesn't translate 100% into Microsoft or into Apple. So you're best to set it in the platform you're working in and not try and work across the two. You will get quirkiness happening with the calendar, and there's absolutely nothing you can do with that until all these tech companies agree on a universal calendar format. It will be one of the bugbears of our lives. I can see Mr. Stockham, you've got the app for Teams. Is it set to open automatically when you start up? You can change that. So if you in Windows, you can have Teams to start with Windows, or you can choose to have Teams to start when you click on it. That's normally a right click. If it's down in the taskbar and it's in the bottom right corner near the date, and it's a miniature version of Teams. If you right click over from there, you can normally choose start, or you can go to the Windows start options and take Teams out as a program that starts with Windows, and that will stop Teams starting at the same time. Yeah, it is like having Outlook open. You get notifications. How do we set it to open automatically? You just go and you add it to the programs that you want to start in Windows when Windows starts up. So that's just a Windows setting. You can choose any program to start when Windows starts. So you just add Teams into that list of programs that starts. I'm not sure Windows, someone says on Apple devices. If it's on Apple, again, you can choose whether it starts, and that's in preferences on Apple. If you want to use it in Apple, you can choose the same sort of startup features. And someone in the bottoms there got it. Okay, brilliant. Any other questions anyone else has got at this point? Otherwise, I will go into Teams and have a little more of a look into Teams itself.
Yeah, can I just ask a quick question? You might cover it in the next bit.
Yeah.
Just when you are creating a meeting, we're finding that you have to create the meeting for the children and then, or whoever it's for, then send that meeting to them. So alert them that the meeting's been created and then go back into it before the meeting options comes up to then select who can bypass the lobby and which can be attendees and which can be presenters. Is there a way of doing that when you initially start the meeting, or do you have to keep going into it the second time?
I wish that could be changed, and I share your frustrations. If that manage meeting options drop down was there when you were actually setting up the meeting initially, it would be great. But no, you have to send the meeting almost like you're putting it into the calendar, and then go in and pick up those options afterwards. There's no way to do it simultaneously.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Any other questions from anyone? No. Okay, I will carry on, but I will come back and take more questions in a little bit. So don't fear if you think you missed out now, I will come back to you. If you've got a staff team, the staff teams are slightly different. So we said about channels earlier. You'd have a general channel that all the staff are in. You can see here we've got things such as the morning briefing notification, or please read. There's an important notification there about end of day. There's more meetings to join, or we've changed the COVID system because the DFE have updated or government have updated it. You can also share documents. So posts are really useful of having community discussions. And by default, if you've got a staff team, I would just add every single member of staff into the general channel for staff teams. So it works a bit like having a staff room when you're not all together, particularly at the moment where some people will be at home and they aren't able to come into school, or they're having to come in and others are having to be out because you're on a rota. It's just a way that you can all work together. And it can be used as well, and I've seen more schools doing this. If you click the meet button up there, it will automatically call everyone into a meeting that is here in the general channel. And it can be good. I know it's not the same, but it can be good as a bridge towards having some community. And I've seen some schools now saying, look, we are just going to have a virtual break time or a virtual lunch time where we'll come in, we'll have tea, cake and fruit, whatever you like, for half an hour where we just have a no business chat. It's just social. We talk to each other and everyone's in here, but we can connect as a community, and it just helps for everyone's mental well-being to feel like they're connected as part of the school again. And it can be very difficult to get all those people together, particularly with social distancing and the concerns other people might have because they need to keep themselves separate. So it can be used for that, but also you can have channels down here for specific reasons. So in a staff team, you might have a business manager channel, and you saw that I selected private earlier when I had the pupil chat. Well, it's got a padlock there because I own it. I can see that it's a private channel. But for everyone else, they would only see that channel. And if I was a business manager, I would see it because it's my channel. And as the head, I might see it because I might have access to that channel. But nobody else in the school would have an awareness that that channel existed. But it means that unlike here in the general channel where everyone can join into this conversation, the business manager could be over here having a chat about budget with the head, and everyone else would be completely oblivious to it. And it's a private chat, and it means you haven't got to have a small chat over here. It's actually a defined role within the school, and there's a very legitimate reason for having that. It's not just around having chats. It's also around having files. One of the other considerations when you get Teams is just the impact it's going to have around access to resources from anywhere. It's designed for that. And instead of having to either log in remotely to school or come into school to get to things like the whole school shared area, the general channel in the staff team can act like the whole school staff share. So this file section here can be accessible to absolutely anyone. You could have gone on holiday to Spain and be in lockdown for 2 weeks in quarantine, but you could still get into your documents from school in the whole school staff share if they've been put up here into the files section. But on the flip side, if I was a business manager and in the files section here, I've put in a budget for this academic year into next academic year because I'm working on budget already. Well, that's in there and that's private, and me and the head could have a look at that, but nobody else is going to be able to get into that because that's a private channel. So there are lots of reasons why you have things like an admin office team and so forth, because it segregates out different roles within school. And that's not because you're being antisocial, but it allows you to keep your documents and work within small communities without overwhelming everybody else about things they don't need to know or files they shouldn't have access to. So when we talk about having channels in a team, and in particularly this is a staff team, that's what we mean. And it's something that you need to think about and how that's going to work. Just like before, you've got all the same options in there if you're an owner or administrator. You can remove yourself from teams and channels if you want. You can go in and you can re-edit them and add those lovely little pictures and rename them. You've got all those options. But think about you and your school and how you want it to work for you. You can have things in here as well, like governors teams, and you can have a general channel, which is the whole governors. You can have lots of little subcommittees working down the side. And instead of platforms like Governors Hub and everything, you can have all the governors files in here. If you're in a trust, you can have trust teams where central trust teams work there and you can get access to them, or you can have a general channel and people in the trust can come and work with you as well. So that's that philosophy of the one digital hub works in many different ways. Or on the other side of that, if we're in the business that we're here for, which is teaching and learning in a lot of instances, you can have your class teams to work with classes of pupils, but you could also have things like intervention groups if you want some small group intervention. That can still keep going, even though we haven't got the pupils with us. And you can create a maths intervention group. And in here, you could be working with a small group of pupils on maths intervention, English intervention, and you can invite them into that team and you can remove them from that team and they'll feel like they're going out and they're coming out of the classroom and they're working with you as a small group, but they're doing it remotely and virtually over Teams at the same time. So there's a lot of scope for how you can mold the opportunities that Teams presents to you. And you certainly won't use all of this, but you could use some of this and you could still get to pupils. The same with the pastoral aspect for staff. You can do that with pupils as well. So I often say it's worth having a morning session where you just talk to them and you almost have like some carpet time in a primary, you might have tutor group time in a secondary, or you could arrange one-to-one slots with pupils where you get together with them and you have a chat about how they're feeling, or you get together a small group you know that are struggling with their own mental health and you think it would be beneficial for them to meet on a daily basis, and actually that's something they look forward to in another support mechanism for the school. So there's lots of ways that you could use Teams in that context as well. When you come into your class team, it works in a very similar way with posts that it did in staff team, except the discussion now is open between you as a member of staff and the pupils that you've got in here. And you'll see conversations that go backwards and forwards, or if you've got an English live lesson, I've tagged it in there for the pupils. So instead of putting in the staff team like the example I showed you, I put in this primary class team. So all the pupil has to do, even from a young age, they click that meeting there and it launches up the live session and they go in. And after showing them once or twice, they can cope with that, even from Key Stage 1. In Key Stage 1, I would suggest only using posts and forget all the other features and teams. Don't bother with it. Wait till they get higher up to school. But getting them used to just logging in, click their classroom, they automatically arrive here in general. That's one of the reasons why we say just have the general channel, and they see the last three things that you've put in there for them to come in and see. And if one of them is a live lesson, they get used to just clicking on that and going into their live lesson. It might be that you've pre-recorded something, so instead of that being an animation there, that's the recorded video of you. They press play on that, and that's like you giving the welcome in the morning when they come in the classroom, where it might be a starting activity for the day, and you explain the different things that they're going to be doing from the morning. So there's lots of different ways that you can use this post section with pupils, but be aware that pupils can reply as well. That's the default policy here in Teams. So when you click the reply button, you'll start to get a dialogue going backwards and forwards between you and them, and they've got the same options that you had. If you want to start a new conversation, they're down here at the bottom. Hit the edit tool, and then you can make the sorts of posts I've got above. There are a few additional options here in posts compared to the chat. So you can have a conversation, or you can make an announcement. If you decide to go to announcement, That's where I've got those banners from. The banners can have different colours in the backgrounds, and the colours can add emphasis, and it's quite useful for drawing people's attention in. But also those banners can be used to pull in pictures. So down the bottom there, you can choose a picture, and that picture could be something from the Microsoft gallery, and you can choose an illustration, or you can upload your own image, and there's lots in there to choose from, and it just makes things stand out. I'd use those quite sparingly, otherwise it gets lost when you've got to make an announcement, but it does draw their attention in if they're seeing that for the first time, and the same works with staff as well. If you don't want people to reply, you either disable that as a policy in Teams admin, but I would say if you can avoid that, because what you end up with is hundreds of telephone calls and frustrated parents and pupils asking questions because they can't ask you in the team. It's better to get them used to them asking you questions in here, but make it clear to them you've got a life as well, and you're only going to be answering those questions during school time, and you won't be doing it in the evenings and so forth. And also make it clear with the expectation for parents that this isn't another method of getting to the class teacher and pestering them. They've got well explained methods of getting hold of the teacher in school, and they need to use those, not abuse the class team that their child's enrolled in. If you don't want everyone to be able to reply, you can change it to only moderators can reply, such as yourself, and then that reply option disappears for them, and it becomes more of a notification going to pupils. You can post out to other channels in other teams. So it's saying here that I'm going to post it in the general channel of the primary class team, and that's what that little block means there. But if I was in a school that was a larger school and with 2, 3, 4 entry intake, it might be that I've got parallel year groups. If it was another year 2 class, I could click on general there. You've got your little tick, you press update. So now when I post this here for my class, it would automatically post across to the other year 2 class, and they would see the same message. So we're all acutely aware of workload and balancing the role of being parents at home and still doing the job we've got in school. And if you can do that, and help each other in post smartly in teams, or attach and share resources smartly in teams, do it. Make your life easier, make everyone's life easier. It's just one of the benefits of having the resources in here. If you are also, and I'm going to jump out of that one, if you're also in here and you are, should discard that one, not close, you're responding in a post and you're attaching a resource, you can browse to other, as a member of staff, not as a pupil, you can browse to other teams and channels. So if you've got colleagues in the school that you know have prepared something, it's going to be really useful for you. So if it was over there in what's the Turn It On demo team, and I went into Maths Oak and there was a resource in there isn't in this instance, I could pick up that document that they've created and I could upload a copy into my team, and it saves me having to reinvent the wheel or go searching elsewhere. So the ability to collaborate, a bit like you wander down the corridor to somebody else's classroom and say, yeah, did you have a photocopy sheet for doing 3D properties of shape? Yeah, can I borrow that? And it'd be quite useful to do something for my class. Well, you can do that here in Teams as well. You can borrow from each other. So posts have got lots of different uses. When you start chatting with pupils, you'll get used to uncollapsing discussions and they go forth in here. If these are all staff chatting, but if one of these was a pupil, when you click the 3 dots on the side, you'll have the option not to delete, but you'll have, sorry, if you're not to edit, but you'll have the option to delete for pupils. So you can delete their posts if it's something you know that's going to cause offence, and it will disappear from the view of other pupils, but it won't disappear for you. It just goes greyed out. And then if at a later date a parent picks up and says, look, my child wasn't particularly happy, what went on today in their class team wasn't acceptable, X people said this and other people said that, you could go back as a member of staff and you could see the ghosted out comments, which would help you to then have that discussion with the parent. But from a pupil perspective, it's gone out of their view and it's no longer causing the upset for them. So you've got control over pupil comments. I find more success in managing the pupils being able to reply and interact than switching that feature off. That causes more problems than them sometimes stepping out of line and pushing their luck or not following the expectations that you've set out around posts. When you are using posts to post documents, if I went up here, here's some information about shape I wanted them to read. Post shouldn't be a vehicle used for sending out work and collecting in work. It's used for sending out information for them to read or access, but it's messy because then you end up with lots of replies and each people would attach their work when they replied. Everyone can see everyone else's, and you could and never people would download a copy of each other's and copy it and steal it and then pass it off as their own. So don't try and use posts for that reason. You use class notebook or assignments, which we'll look at in just a bit. But anytime that you upload a file here in Post and share it, it will automatically get saved over here in Files. So Post is just a lovely front end to access it. But that document, when I was looking at, is actually stored here in Files. You can ignore Files if you wish, or you can embrace it, and some schools do. You could organize it so every pupil has their own folder in here. You could organize it so you've got your different subjects and you put the resources in there for pupils to access. You could have weeks of the term, so it's the starting date of the week on the Monday, and then you tidy the folders into term 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. It's however you want to manage that file section, or ignore it. And I've got other schools that do nothing but just let the files stack up in here as they're attached from posts. The important thing to emphasize about files, with the exception of the class materials folder, any other folder and file that's in here will be accessible to any pupil as well as a member of staff. So do not put anything in there that's sensitive. It is for teaching and learning resources only in a class team. Class materials is more restricted. And then pupils can't mess around with the files in there. But if you're sticking it generally into the files tab, be aware that they can read it. So no EHCPs or anything else like that. Do not put them in the files section of a class team, because the pupils will be able to read them and open them up. So files and posts are linked to each other. You don't have to use files for distributing work because you've got other features to do that. Now over here, when we were in posts, some of you will have noticed there were things like assignments. And what you can do is you can set assignments for pieces of homework, and then those pieces of homework appear here in the feed for each pupil. But when they click on view assignment, it will take them to their own individual assignment or their own individual piece of work, and then allow them to work on that and send it back to you. So it saves that headache of overwriting the original version, because if you try to do it from editing the version that's in here, if it's something that is editable, they'll click on it, they'll all open up in Word inside of Teams, which is great, it keeps it in one place. But what they'll be doing is they'll all be editing the same one document, they'll be writing on top of each other's work, they'll be deleting each other's work, and chaos will ensue. So the assignments is suitable for setting pieces of homework or pieces of distance learning that's back after a set period of time. All you do is go to assignments. In here as a teacher, pupils see assignments, but they see a slightly different view. They just see the list here that's assigned. But as a teacher, you see draft assignments you're creating, assignments that are live, and that's what pupils see as well. And then you as a teacher also see returned assignments, and you get a create button because you can make assignments. Pupils don't get a create button. And for tabs at the top, pupils see posts, files, class notebook, and assignments, but only you would see grades, and only you as a teacher will see insights. That doesn't feature for pupils. In here are assignments that I've got that are live. Up here are ones that I'm creating in private before I assign them. So it's a bit like preparing your homeworks before you send them out. And then once everyone's handed something in, it would move from live assignment to return. So here I can see I've set this for 4 pupils, and 2 out of the 4 have returned it. Once all 4 have returned it and everything is returned, it will move down to the bottom. To create an assignment, I press the create button. You can either choose from an existing assignment you've made previously, and as you go through the academic year, you can start to upcycle and recycle stuff. You can make quizzes using Microsoft Forms, and that will set up a quiz that you'll need to make, but it marks itself. It's good for checking learning is secure or checking prior learning. And the other thing is to make an assignment. And when you go to the assignment, it will have lots of different sections you can fill in. Now, rather than me going through an empty one, I'm just going to discard that. And I'm going to go to one in here that I've made before. And in here is an assignment I've set for English. We're going to be looking at information texts. You can also tag. So I'm going to say it's reading. You could tag it as reading, writing, SPAG, whatever you like to break down your subjects, but also to signpost it for staff and pupils. Once that's in there, you go down to give them some instructions. Regardless of year group, I find that keeping it to bullet points and keeping it as short as possible is the most effective. Whether it's year 11 or year 4, if I put in a block of text and a paragraph, I tend to get a bad outcome from my homework. If I give it small, snappy bullet points, I usually get better quality homework returned. You can add in websites in here as well in the instructions by clicking the website button up there. That's where I click that, and you can have your basic formatting, but you can additionally attach resources for it to be set as the homework. If you want to attach a resource, pretty much any resource can be attached in here. Just think about whether the file format can be opened at home. If you're setting a PDF document, how on earth are they going to write on top of that? Are they going to be able to print it out and then scan a copy back in and send it to you? Or does it need to be something that they can edit? If it is a PDF and you've got something like Twinkle that you subscribe to, that's fine. If you've got a account for that as a school or as an individual, then why not just snip the Twinkle PDF and put it into a Word document, and then they could answer the questions underneath or right over the top of it with the tools in Word, and then you've taken away the headache of whether they've got an adult to scan it back in or whether they've got ink and a printer to print it out at home. So it's just thinking about how it's going to work when you're setting those homeworks. Again, when you're attaching the homeworks, it can look at your OneDrive. You can pick up pages from your class notebook, which will be the final that we look at next. You can insert a link from a website, although you can do that in the instructions. You can author a new file, so you can start a new PowerPoint and then attach that if you wish. Again, you can go to other people's teams and you can dip in and you can pick up resources that are over there. And you can go and bring them in here. So if there is a resource, you could attach that there, or down the bottom you can upload from your computer. There's lots of ways that you can get resources in, but again, yeah, think about how they're going to be accessed at home. You could use points and you can assign points, or you can have no points at all. You can leave that box empty. If it's something for a little bit of fun, and I might say, well, there's 10 questions here, I'm going to say it's a point per question. We'll have a challenge, or maybe they're in year 6 and it won't be this year, but maybe in future years we're doing some practice SATs questions or something. We want them to understand it's 3 points a question. I've got 10 questions, so there's 30 points available. I could use points, or I might leave them out. You can additionally add in a rubric, but this isn't a necessity. Rubrics break down how you expect the homework to look. So it might be here, it's not an English example, it's lines of symmetry and shapes. I've given a description there. Here would be my learning objective. In here are my success criteria broken down by level of challenge, whether it's emerging, expected, exceeding, mild, spicy, hot, however you use those terms in your school. You can delete these to have less. So if you only have 3 levels of challenge, you can take it out instead of it being 4. If you wanted to have 5, you add them in there and you can format them. You can also have points associated with that or not. And then you can attach that. I tend to use rubrics if it's something complex and I want to give a very explicit expectation of what I want in the way of the work returned to me. Otherwise, I would explain it over here in instructions instead. Down the bottom, you can choose. You can see here at the moment I've got it assigned to 2 classes, so I could assign homework for a colleague as well, or it could just be for my classroom. Choose the pupils it's going out to, decide on a time and a date when it's going to come back in, and the option there at the bottom says they're going to get notified as a post over here that they've got an assignment set so they can go in and use it. And then you're either going to assign it or you're going to save it, and if it's saved, it'll stay out there in your drafts until you assign it, and that's private to you, so you can make your homeworks in advance and then they're ready to go out. So you can still get homework out to pupils, you can still get new resources to them, and they can return that back into you. What would that look like from a pupil point of view? So in here, maths 3D shape. If I want to see what it looks like from a pupil's point of view, very, very minimal option. There's a rubric in there about lines of symmetry, 10 points available, instructions are single line, and I've attached no resources. That's what it would look like from a pupil point of view. If you're thinking, oh, that's great, but actually, do you know what? I don't think the literacy there is going to be the barrier to being successful in learning. You may have already seen it, but scattered throughout Teams and Office 365 are tools that can help here. They're in posts, they're everywhere. Immersive Reader, if I switch that on, it will then bring in a streamlined version, getting rid of all the busyness that's going on, and then that can be read to me. So if I press play as a pupil,
Maths 3D shape, due the 2nd of October,
it will then read it out to me. And I can change other options in there. So I can change the font size. I can choose the type of font available to me, however I'd like it to be. If I'm visually impaired and I need a background that's maybe pale green, I can change that to pale green. I can keep it formatted in the way of the original post, or I can get rid of the formatting and just have it naturally as it was. I could also highlight things in here such as nouns, or if I didn't want to have nouns highlighted, I can turn nouns off. I can have it so they're labelled up in the text, so you can see there's an N there for noun or an ADJ for adjective, or I can turn that off. That's another good way for deconstructing text. I can have line focus if I've got dyslexia and there's too much text on the page and it's all just moving around for me. I can take away that by using line focus. I can also have picture dictionaries enabled. So if I was to click on a word, it will read it separately for me, but it will give me a pictorial version if it's available. And you will see there when I clicked on a word, it shows it in other languages. So it's got it there in Dutch. But I can enable other languages to translate. So if you've got EAL pupils or parents at home that you know that can struggle to access that, they can translate that into their native language so that you produce the resource once and then they adapt it to suit their learning needs or their language needs. So that's there for them as well. And that's available everywhere in there. As you go through and you start to work with pupils, let's go to geography. You can see here I've got 2 left to return. So Susanna and my demo pupil haven't, but Sydney and Henry have returned their work. I can in here give them individual feedback, so that's only seen by them. In this instance, I can assign points, but once it's all returned, it moves into that returned folder down the bottom. For me, as a member of staff, that grades option is a mark book online, so I can see all my pupils stacked up here, so you'd have approximately 30. Here are my different assignments that I've set. I can go in here and give points. I can see if I've returned it to them, but if I want to go and mark their work, I click the dots on the side and then go in here, and the work that they would have handed back is there. I can still give that individual feedback. I can still give the points, and I can move between the pupils in here. So there's a way to give that individualized homework feedback, and they get it returned to them, and they get notified when it's returned to them by I press the return button at the bottom. But I can still manage that as a teacher remotely, but I could do that in school as well. And I get a lot of people that have decided to keep this for some, and in some cases all of the homework, and they're managing their homework through there because there's traceability of homework and there's an evidence log, particularly with pupils that maybe are finding it difficult to get homework in on time or return any homework at all. So that's homeworks and posts and files. Before I go into class notebook, I'm just going to pop back over and pick up any questions, and then we'll finish with class notebook. So coming back from last time, can staff edit a document and it will save this way? Mr. Scott, what sort of document are you asking if people can edit there? You can unmute and speak with me if you wish, or type in down the bottom. Word, yeah. If it's in an area where pupils have got access, so it's in a post, yes, they could open it up and edit it just like a teacher. If it's in the homework and it's an attached Word document, Word opens up straight inside of Teams and you can edit in there. When I go back, I'll show you how that works. I got another question here, and with posting other teams and other channels, you cannot do this if you're attaching documents, if there's a Word document attached. Could this be a policy issue? I would say that is a policy issue because you should be able to do that, and that's quite unusual that you can't. Another question there, if a child misses a deadline, what will it look like at the end? So it will end up with them not having returned their work, and it will say not handed in. You can, in that feedback box, you can jog them by giving feedback saying, if you're having trouble with this, please let me know, and we could chat separately or something like that. But it just means that they won't be returned because they haven't hit their deadline for returning it back to you. The Word document thing, if I quickly pop back over there just to clear that up before I take the next questions in there. If I went to files, for example, everything is here in Teams. So if a pupil was editing a Word document from homework or wherever, you click on the Word document, you might give it a name. So I'm going to put an example. I'm going to press create, and then here inside of Teams, Word, Excel or PowerPoint, the piece of software launches here inside of Teams, and they've got a lot of the options you'd have on the full-blown software. You can open it in the desktop version if you need, and then you can edit here inside of Teams, and when they're finished you just press close, and it's either going to save back to their homework in their assignment if they've opened it up from their homework. In this instance, it's going to save in the Files tab, or if they're doing that from their own personal OneDrive, it will save back to their OneDrive. Next question, can you quickly recap on the delete and reply to posts? Yep, I can do that when I go back in there in a second. Is there a way to clear the backlog of assignments? You've got a number of children who haven't submitted. Yeah, there should be. We'll go back and have a look at that in a minute. What do children see if they miss does that miss the assignment, Mr. Walker? Sorry, Mr. Scott. I'll let you just respond to that. If they missed a deadline, yeah, if they missed a deadline, it tells them that they've got an assignment outstanding. What they see, I would need to log in as a pupil, and then you could see that. But effectively, when they click on assignments, if I go across to here, they would click on the assignments here. They would see what's assigned, so it would still appear as an assigned assignment that they haven't turned back in. That's the way that they would see it. So you can click on assignments there, or you can click on assignments at the tab in the team itself. So I'll go back to the class team. For them, they would see them as white and not returned. They need to get them returned in. They've missed the deadline. The recapping the post. So quickly recap the post. Yeah. Okay, so I go back to posts. If you are a member of staff, and in here, I haven't got a recent pupil that's replied to one, but this conversation here between me and another member of staff, if my reply was a pupil, I click the 3 dots on the side, and then I wouldn't have an edit button because it belongs to the pupil, so I can't edit their comment. But what I can do is I can delete it. So you delete it there. It appears to me still as a ghosted comment, but for them, it disappears out of view altogether. So that's how that one works. Backlog of assignments. Let's go have a look at clearing the backlog of assignments. So on here, if I load my previous assignments, and for instance, I've got a science assignment that wasn't handed in ever. If I go to the 3 dots, doesn't appear to be. That is a good question.
At the moment, that's something I've raised. Sorry, just to butt in. That's something I've raised for you teachers have raised with Microsoft, where you've got great big huge lists of assignments. At the moment, Microsoft haven't got any way of filing those assignments. The only thing you can do is delete the whole assignment, which you obviously don't want to do because you lose all your records. So at the moment, it's something they're looking into, they said. But at the moment, it just means you've got a giant list of loads of assignments there.
Which is the right pain.
Hi, can I say so?
Yeah.
The only way we found of doing it was putting some sort of comment in the feedback and returning them all. And then, although that appears, you know, some children haven't done the work, it appears like they've done it and returned it. But that was the only way we found of doing it as well. So it's still there. But when you go into it, you can see that they haven't done it, maybe, but it looks like they've all returned it. But that was the only way we could find.
So, yeah, I would say that would have been the way I would have tried. The very early days when this was developed, there was a way to do that, and it was deleted, I would have said, within the first year of being a product, and it's never come back as a feature, which is highly annoying because, as you say, you end up with this list which is uncontrollable and you can't do anything with them. I'm just seeing if we can do that here now. Enter feedback and return. So that should be all of my pupils returned. Oh no, that one there. Return, and then if I close that, they should all be returned in, and then it's moved out of assigned up there, and it should be moved into returned down here. And I think, as you say, that's the only way I agree with you. That's the only way I can think of forcing it through to get them out of that list. There are some things that we all would dearly love to see, and yeah, I would say that is one of them. You've got the option to feedback to Microsoft, so if you know that something's annoying you, it's probably annoying all the other teachers in the country, so keep bombarding them, because once they get enough requests, their team will then sit up, take notice and develop it. They are receptive. They do read those feedback comments that go in. They don't go into a void somewhere. So if you are feeding it back, bearing in mind someone keeps track of that, and they will then develop a feature if there's enough people demanding it. That will shape the future of how quickly something gets changed or developed as well. Okay, I'm gonna pop over and finish off. So OneNote Class Notebook is the final bit of what we're going to do this afternoon. OneNote Class Notebook is for that day-to-day teaching element. I'm acutely aware that some people in here have attended other sessions, so if you've already seen this bit, I'm going to cover some of the areas that you may have seen previously, but I've also got people here who haven't seen this yet, so I'm going to go through it. OneNote Class Notebook, once you've gone through that creation wizard I showed you way back at the beginning of this training session, You'll arrive here where it says welcome to class notebook, and down the side you'll have the collaboration space created for you. You'll have the content library, teachers only section, and you'll have a file or a notebook folder created for every single pupil that you've got in your class. And then depending on the names of the sections that you chose in the wizard that starts up, you'll have the sections that you've got in there for them. And the sections by default are things like classwork, quizzes, handouts, very generic and not very helpful. So I would rename them in the wizard, and then they will appear in here for every pupil, just to save you an awful lot of work. If you've run the wizard, you can only choose those create sections for all pupils once. There's no way of going back and doing it. And if you need to go back and then add a section in retrospectively, annoyingly, there isn't a bulk create section for all pupils. So you have to go in and you have to go to create new section and visit each pupil one by one and make them there. So when you run that wizard, think before you run it and try and choose enough sections so that you don't have to go in and do that. As well as right clicking over there, the default that we set schools up with it through DFE work is for pupils not to be able to have a lot of these edit rules. But as a teacher, you can go back in, you can delete a section and take it out. You could also change colors. So if you want them to look different colors and so forth, and you can drag these around and reorder them as well. So you've got some control over that. The best way to think of OneNote class notebook is like a massive teaching resource folder. And in that teaching resource folder, you've got different subsections or section dividers. They're like the paper tabs that you used to stick out the side in a lever arch folder where you might write the name of what's in that section. And then in those sections, you can file different pages. And the pages could be absolutely anything at all, from a plain piece of paper through to hole punching a piece of photocopy paper. And then the paper itself is an endless piece of blank canvas. And you can then type text on here, you can paste text on there, you can use the drawing tools, you can ink over the top, you can insert videos, you can embed animations, you can even drop files onto the surface of the page by inserting files, which will then open up from there. And I know some people have had a few problems with files and policies stopping them doing that, but once those policies are amended, you and pupils can open files that are thrown onto the surface of the page. And that's another reason why you wouldn't really use the files section for doing that, because the associated resource can be dropped here onto the surface of the page. It could still be stored there in files. It's up to you how you want to organize that. The sections themselves, the collaboration space is that it allows you to collaborate as a member of staff with pupils or pupils with other pupils. It's entirely open. In any page that's in any of these sections that I've created, any people go in and edit. So whether it was my book review here and they're writing what their book review was and their names against the comment from their book review. So it could all be in one document. It could be as well that you have some topic work crossing over with English. And what we want them to do here is go and look at different aspects of Egyptian culture, be it religion, housing and food and so forth. And they could put their names in here, or you could have a separate page and you could have Egypt housing, Egypt religion, Egypt culture. And then each group of pupils work on a separate page, but the pupils could click on the different pages. Like I've got music, they could click on the different Egyptian pages and they could go and look at each other's work. Or you could pause the live lesson and you're having a mini plenary in the middle of the lesson, and they could each click on the pages as you're commenting on it and you're feeding back, and they can move in between. It will mean that they can do anything they like to each other's pages. They can edit, they can delete, and you need to talk about being respectful of each other's work in there. So collaboration space could be small group, it could be whole class, but there will be times when you don't want that. So content library allows you to pop in a page. If it was my maths worksheet here about 2D shape and properties of 2D shape, that might be a worksheet I want them to pick up. Now, providing your pupils are old enough, in here, pupils will only be able to view that. They have what's called read-only access, but as a teacher, you can edit it, you can delete it, you can do what you like to it, but it means that the original is not destroyed, unlike the collaboration space. If I was a pupil, I might want to right-click and take a copy of that. And here I wouldn't have moved because pupils don't. I'm in as a member of staff. I'd have copy. And if I was dear old Henry here, and this was a piece of maths work. I click on my maths folder and I take a copy, like lifting a piece of paper off of a pile of photocopies, and it will take a copy of the original and it will put it into my own area. So even though I'm working as a distance learning teacher, I could then go to Henry's folder, I could go to maths, and I could have a look at what he was doing in here. And if that subtraction activity was the 2D shape, whatever he was writing in there, I would be able to see, like I was looking over his shoulder as a page in his book, and he was sat at a desk in my classroom. So there's a lot of powerful reasons why you use OneNote Class Notebook, and it's there for a live teaching tool. Now, that's all well and good if they're old enough to do that, but you might have younger pupils that you want to distribute out to, or you might even want to organise that in advance. So there's huge amount of tools in here. We run entire separate training sessions on just OneNote. But one of the ways that you could distribute that individually is you could be on that page and you've got class notebook tab here, and that's exclusive to class teams. So you get OneNote in all teams. A OneNote class notebook has got lots of teaching and learning tools in there, and there are many across all these different tabs here on the top. But what you could do is you could distribute that page. You can send it out to groups of pupils, and in here we can set up groups of pupils. Those groups can be defined by you, and that's quite handy. One of the first things that I always say is useful to do is for you to go in and create a whole class group. All you do is you click the new group button at the bottom, and it will come up with something that looks a bit like this, where you can choose from the 30 pupils, you tick them all. If I go into editing mode, you tick them all in, and you can call that group whole class, and you save it. Then you might also have other groups for specific reasons, interventions, extension activities, clubs that you might be running virtually, and then you can choose to send this work out. So it might be you're going to send it to the whole class, and you're going to do this the night before or the morning before the live lesson. So I click whole class, I click next, I say I want this to go into the maths folder for each of the individual pupils over here, and I press distribute, and then electronically it throws out pieces of digital paper and it plonks a copy into their maths section there, and it's ready for them to use after they've watched maybe the video of me in post explaining what I want them to do with 2D shapes. If you're thinking there's not a lot of space to work here, you've got tools to extend the space to get rid of all that clutter in Teams on the sides, and you've got space there, or you can open it natively in OneNote as well if you want. That does take them out of Teams, so I tend to show them expanding the view in Teams to keep them in here so that particularly younger pupils don't get confused or lost. On also the group distribution aspect, you can go, to individual distribution. If you had a couple of pupils that said, look, I've got through all that work, I need something else to keep me going, there's still another 20 minutes of the lesson. So if Sydney and Susanna came to me, I could say, well, Sydney and Susanna, that's great. This isn't now the main activity for the lesson. This is an extension activity. I click next. I'm going to pop something into your maths folder. Girls, can you go back there? I press distribute. And then for me, although I'm working in my house at home, that will get distributed out to them. And within a matter of seconds in Sydney's folder and Susanna's folder, they would then in their maths section down there you go, it's done already. Sydney would then have that worksheet. So I go to the maths folder and they could then be in there working, and I could still dip back in. I could go in and check, and definitely having a broadband moment where I'm working at the moment. You go into their maths folder and you can look at their individual copies. So there's lots of ways that you can use Class Notebook for the day-to-day. There's a lot more in there than what I've just shown you there. It's just a getting started. But the first basics that most people start with is just putting some text on the page and maybe inserting a picture and then sending them out via distribution. So the day-to-day teaching tool it's designed to be used is OneNote Class Notebook, assignments for homework, and then the post for communications. So you've got that whole toolkit in your arsenal, but for starting off and getting going, posts are absolutely crucial. It's the cornerstone of then getting used to coming in and checking and then using what's here in the post and accessing that information, then drip feed in the other areas as is either right for your age group or you as a group of staff or the pupils or even the parents at home that are supporting the pupils that can only maybe cope with so much as well. So pick the bits that you know that are going to be useful to you and then bring in the other bits as and when, or ignore them and park them to one side as and when you have use of them, or you may never touch them at all. But what we're here to do is show you the possibilities. So with that final bit, I'm going to come back over and pick up any more questions that are going in there. So someone's put a question in there, Mr. Griffiths. We have a problem with Teams removing children from meetings or muting a teacher. I think it's because teachers haven't set themselves as a, yeah, that is exactly that. You need to set yourself as a presenter, and then everyone else that comes in here will be assigned as just somebody that's in there as a member, an attendee. So if you set yourself as a presenter, you then have control over that, and then anyone that's here as an attendee would not and wouldn't be able to remove other people. So it's important that you assign those roles. Can you change the background on a close? Yes, you can. So changing the background, let me jump over. My broadband is suffering eternally here, so if this works, great. But no, it's not gonna. It's freezing up for me each time I right click. So you should be able to right click there and change. You have an option to change your background. There is also an option on the ribbon, which, forgive me, it's flown my mind, but you can, if this isn't freezing up, right click and do it from there. It is on the ribbon. I think it might be on insert, if that's even going to load for me. I think that stopped loading as well. I really am suffering from broadband lag here today. Yeah, you can change the background. You can have pretty much what you like in the background: lined, maths, squared, graph, and so forth. So it doesn't have to be plain white paper. You could also change the color of that paper background as well. So if you know you've got visually impaired pupils that you're working with, and it needs to be a pale cream or a yellow, then it's possible to do that too. So you can change the background on. It doesn't have to be that glaring white that I've got here. Any other questions? You can either unmute or pop them into the chat for me. Hopefully I can go across and use the other side. No. We have covered an awful lot in the session today, and it was around that structural setup as well as using the platform. And most people usually feel then they just need to go away and have a go at playing around with it, or they found something new and they're going to go away and try it in their school. Whichever one you need to do, have a go. We're running more of these sessions around teams or specific areas of teams, so you're welcome to come back at any point and join those. Tiana from the team has just put in the links to the next sessions in there. Thank you very much. I mentioned at the beginning that we would be awarding you a code today from the training. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pop the code that you've got to redeem in the Microsoft Education Centre here into the training, and I'll just do that now. And then I'll also pop you the link in there too. So the code is there. If you go to the Microsoft Education Centre, you'll get the award becoming a certified MIE from today. And I'll also pop in the link to the Microsoft Education Centre in there, and then I'll come back and pick up any questions that we've got. Okay, the link to the Microsoft Education Centre where you need to go to create that account or to redeem that code is there. So I'm just going to stop the recording and I'll take any other questions.